Good morning. Welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm Reverend Paul Beckel. At my monthly meetings with the celebrant team, we brainstorm about what may be on people's minds and hearts over the next month or two, and what themes may be appropriate to respond to Buff's collective aspirations and apprehensions. But instead of looking forward a month or even a season, we found ourselves in agreement that the entire calendar year of 2024, it being an election year, and already laden with so much war and uncertainty, over which we will have very little, if any, control, that the most compassionate, welcoming, and yes, even challenging themes could call attention to sanctuary and what sanctuary can mean in our context in these times. So you may have noticed that I've been making a lot of references to sanctuary on recent Sundays and our newsletter articles. Today, though, we'll be addressing it head on, as I invite you to reflect on the richness and comfort and power of sanctuary, but also its shadow, when in seeking respite, refuge, or retreat from the world out there, rather than toward things in here, sanctuary takes on a different character, to more of a fortress mentality, which is totally understandable. We see in centuries of religious architecture, doctrine, and music. Do you know that one? Yes, a mighty fortress. We have everything from metaphor to very real stone walls to remind us that while openness and vulnerability can be aspects of spiritual awakening, we prefer to approach spiritual awakening, if possible, in the context of physical and emotional safety. Over the past 2,000 years, religion has often held up a shield of moral authority, providing a safe haven for corrupt government, creating this wall. And governments have provided legal, financial, and physical protections to sustain iffy religious leadership. So it's not surprising that sometimes you can't tell the difference, why we need to tell the difference. But when we look at some medieval and Renaissance architecture, it's often you can't tell what's a church and what's a castle. This one is the Eastern Orthodox Church of the Holy Mother of God in Bulgaria. It's the best preserved remnant of a mostly ruined castle known as Athens Fortress. There's a dispute as to whether the tower was a bell tower used to call people in or a watchtower to keep people out. Probably both. We will light our chalice today in loving memory of Frank Morrow, who died this past Sunday. Frank and Liz Morrow have been members of this congregation for 57 years. In all of that time, Frank brought a light heart to his service and leadership at Buff, as well as wisdom to the fun and games. Meanwhile, he was an attorney and WWU professor who served as Whatcom County Juvenile Court Commissioner. Liz says that a memorial for Frank will be held within the next couple of months. We will let you know. Let's light our chalice in honor of Frank. The Buff Covenant came together as a collaborative conversation among congregation as a whole. The current version has to be at least a couple of decades old, so Frank was probably there at the start. So in his honor, let's say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant. And let's stand and sing together, Gather the Spirit, which is number 340. Oh, it's right up there. Compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind, seeds for the soul in our laden store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy and strength, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. I know some are already up here. If any of the others want to come up and come up close.
This book is called Sweet Strawberries. Does anybody here like strawberries? Me too. Fritz was taking his fish to market and his wife Flo was going along too. He wasn't the worst man in the world, but he wasn't the nicest either. The woman had been his wife for a good long time, and she was used to his ways. After he helped her into the wagon, Flo said, "I do hope they have strawberries, plump and sweet. I haven't had strawberries for many a month." And Fritz said, "Complain, complain. All you do is complain." "It was only a thought," said Flo. As they rounded the bend, a young lass herded her flock of geese across the road. The horse had to stop, and Fritz grew restless. "Why didn't you wait till we had gone by?" he called gruffly. "My dear," said Flo, "she is just a young girl." "She's too impatient," said Fritz, "always in a hurry." When they came to the village, the boy who tended the gate had fallen asleep. Fritz did not want to get down out of the wagon, and he shouted, "Here, boy, on your feet." "My dear," said Flo, "he's just a young lad." "He's the laziest boy I ever saw," said Fritz. As the man turned his horse toward the shade of a tree, a farmer with 5 children pulled his wagon in first. "You selfish oaf," Fritz yelled at the driver. "Didn't you see I was going to put my wagon there?" "My dear," said his wife, "that farmer has a wagon load of children needing shade." "That was my spot," said Fritz. "I park there every market day." Fritz traded his basket of fish for a bag of flour, but when he found that the sack wasn't full, he cried angrily, "You cheat me, sir. Fill my bag to the top." "My dear," said his wife, "the merchant is old and his eyesight is poor. The sack is almost full." "He's as stingy as they come," said Fritz. He's not nice, is he?
At least not right now.
Fritz and his wife walked about the market, looking at round yellow apples and beans of the brightest green. On a table just ahead, there were some strawberries, plump and red. "Please, let's buy some," Flo begged. "I've never seen strawberries so big and so ripe." Her mouth ached at the sight of them. She could almost taste their sweetness on her tongue. But Fritz shook his head. "They cost too much, far too much," he said. At that, Flo cried out, "You are the most stingy, selfish, lazy, impatient, complaining man I have ever seen." And she climbed back into the wagon and refused to talk. Now, Fritz had been her husband a good long time, but he had never seen her like this. Surely all the unpleasant people they had met that day had simply upset her. So, on the way home, he whistled to the birds to cheer her. "Wee-da-wee, wee-da-wee." Flo folded her arms and said nothing. Then Fritz sang to his horse, "Hey-ho, hi-ho, trot along the road so." His wife, Flo, just looked the other way. Fritz stood up on the wagon and did a little dance as he drove. Tappity-tap, clickety-clack, but Flo said nothing at all and didn't even smile. Once they were home, however, they went about their work as usual and life went on as before. Next Saturday, when Fritz and Flo set out for market, Fritz hoped they would not meet any lasses in a hurry, any lazy lads, any selfish oafs, or stingy tradesmen. He did not want Flo upset again. When he saw the girl with the geese, he slowed his horse and called, "Fine day to you, miss." And the lass, very much surprised, smiled at him and said, "And to you, good sir." When they came to the village and found the boy asleep at the gate, Fritz sang at his lungs, "Hi-dee-dee-ho, hi-dee-dee-hey." The boy awoke and, grinning, jumped up and opened the gate. Once again, Fritz discovered that someone had taken his favorite place beneath the tree. But this time, he said, Ah, well, one tree is as good as another, eh? And parked his wagon somewhere else. And this time, he traded his fish for the largest basket of, what do you think? Strawberries his wife had ever seen. And they both sat down on the grass to enjoy them and then and there, and people waved as they passed. Fritz said, "Isn't it remarkable how everyone has changed so much only in a week?" And that's the end.
And now we're going to go off to your classrooms and sing as you go. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. Nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life. We hold you in our love as you go. I'm so happy to see a number of visitors here today. Thank you for coming. I know that there are visitors out there on Zoom as well, and so for both of you who are here and those of you who are on Zoom, please stay after the service on Zoom. Your mics will be unmuted and you'll have a chance to meet and greet. Same thing here, your mics will be unmuted. Now you can shout amen and preach it and whatever else the whole time. But afterwards, please go downstairs for coffee and conversation. And if you're new, you might want to take a red coffee cup to give us a clue. Or if you're new or been around for years, you might want to go on a building tour with, yes, Judy Casper, who's there in the middle. She's going to be standing in the back with the tour sign. And we do this because we want you to feel at home. And when you see things announced in our newsletter or from the pulpit, you know that you're welcome to attend anything that's going on here at Buff. And we want you to know how to make your way around. I mentioned the newsletter. You can find that. It's called the Midweek Update, and you can find that at buff.org. And you can subscribe to our weekly email that contains the newsletter as well. So, David, Rick, yep. Okay. There is the Raising Anti-Racist Children class that's going to start. Is it next week? The 11th. It's starting February 11th. It's going to happen during the service. So parents who'd be interested in taking a class on raising anti-racist kids, be here, and then after the kids go, or maybe at the start, somebody at the door can tell you. And if possible, let us know in advance, but you can also just show up. So how about you, Rick?
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Rick, but I'm also known as Vlad, so I'm happy to be here this morning. My mission today is just to remind you, in 2 weeks, we kick off our glorious canvas. And we're still looking for some helpers with that, some people to do some canvassing. It's not too late to sign up. We will have training next week, well, not the current week that we're in, but the following week, one by Zoom and one in person. So there's that. We can use your help. Those in Zoom land, you're welcome to join as well. You can Zoom with others, FaceTime, or by phone if you do not want to make person-to-person contact. Also, it is Super Bowl Sunday, 2 weeks from today, surprisingly. But in the morning, we're having a special breakfast for the canvassers. And we have cooks signed up. Sue and John have signed up to cook. We got a wonderful recipe from Roz Reynolds. And so it's going to be really good. But we could use a couple more people to help in the kitchen. If you've done any work at all in the kitchen, particularly for the community night dinners, that'd be very helpful for you to assist Sue and John. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Vlad, I'm going to be showing a number of pictures today, and one of the ones that I was sorting through was Dracula's castle, so it would have been suitable, but I just passed that one by. What I do want to show you is also in Transylvania. This is the Darjui fortified church in the Transylvanian region of modern-day Romania. It was built by the Székely Hungarian community in the 1300s when Transylvania was part of the Kingdom of Hungary. It was originally Catholic, but became Unitarian 200 years later during the Protestant Reformation. And this is our partner congregation in Transylvania, Myers-Savat. It has a less imposing building, but a similar history. The Darjui Fortified Church, that was the previous slide, is about 100 miles southeast of Myers-Savat, and that fortified church is among a cluster of villages that is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site because it has 150 of the original 300 fortified churches that were built in that area. So a lot that are still well preserved. So this is the Biertan Fortified Church, built in the 1400s as a Roman Catholic church. During the Reformation, it became Evangelical Lutheran. It has 3 rows of exterior fortifications built in subsequent centuries. And this one is the Harman Evangelical Lutheran with rings of fortification that aren't just walls, but are buildings used for living space and school and storage. And finally, this is, yes, the Prejmer Evangelical Lutheran Church. All these are in Transylvania. Showing how more and more extensions were often tacked on over the centuries, which was particularly impressive in this case because Prejner village was the first place that the Ottomans would encounter when they crossed a mountain pass into Transylvania. So the town was destroyed over 50 times between the 1200s and 1600s, but the church was rarely captured. The exterior walls, in some places 16 feet thick, contained 270 rooms that could shelter 1,600 villagers in case of attack. So these pictures are not what I was, these pictures are what I was looking for when I typed Sanctuary Fortress into Google. This is what I was looking for, but it's not what I got. I'm not a big video gamer, so I did not expect what I got. Which was an endless stream of images and articles with clues and maps and videos showing the way into Sanctuary Fortress, that location inside of Metroid Prime 2, where the Luminoth went for safe haven when attacked by the Ing, where now, of course, only mechanoids such as Octopede Resbit and Serenity-class drones remain. My ignorance is humbling. Apparently, there is a wide range of meaning and connotation that come to mind for different people when they hear the word sanctuary. Close your eyes for a moment. What pictures come to your mind? What feelings come to your heart? Do the images in your mind and the feelings in your heart correspond with one another? Or are they all a jumble? So connotations of sanctuary range from rock-hard protection to gentle, nourishing sacredness, with countless combinations. Maybe each of us have different expectations, different hopes of what form sanctuary might take, different impressions and needs based on where we are in our lives, the circumstances, our inner personal circumstances that change, and our inner circumstances not necessarily being in sync with the outer circumstances that change at the same time, and sometimes very quickly. The classic Christian hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," was written 500 years ago by Martin Luther. There are different theories as to its original purpose. It might have been written to inspire soldiers as the Ottoman Turks advanced again and again into historically Christian territory. Or its original purpose might have been related to doctrinal battles within Christianity at the very earliest days of the Reformation. It is certainly infused, that hymn is certainly infused with the spirit of Martin Luther and his followers, who brought it with them when they appeared at the Diet of Augsburg in 1530, a convocation of princes and bishops that was called by Holy Roman Emperor Charles V in an attempt to restore unity in the face of the Ottoman threat. Unfortunately for the emperor, the main event of the convocation turned out to be Luther reading what became known as the Augsburg Confession, a statement of doctrine that not only cemented the rift between Lutherans, they weren't quite yet Lutherans, but this was kind of a step on the way to becoming Lutherans separate from Roman Catholics. And also then, when different versions of the Augsburg Confession were published, it became the point of even more splintering into Calvinists and other variations on the theme. But let's shift now to the sense of sanctuary that is not primarily about separation from those outside, and more about connection that takes place inside. Connection within our individual selves, our souls, in the sense of recognizing our wholeness, our own integrity, and then connections between and among ourselves as beloved community. And then connections within, between, and among ourselves made possible by our shared experience with that transcendent mystery and wonder which moves us to compassion and healing and honoring of all creation. Or, if we're talking specifically about the Unitarian Universalist context of sanctuary, where we do not have a creed or any need to think alike in order to love alike. Maybe the connection is not always generated through shared experiences of the transcendent, but through our covenant, our promise to honor each other's experiences of the holy, regardless of whether we call them natural or divine or neither or both. And then, once we have perfected all of these connections, which should be pretty soon, I mean, we've been working at it for a long time, our sense of sanctuary expands. Our boundaries continue to exist, but become more permeable, and we become more confident in passing in and out, and we extend bridges to those on the margins who might find refreshment and renewal within.
Take me to the breaking of a beautiful dawn. Take me to the place where we came from. Take me to the end so I can see the start. There's only one way to mend a broken heart. Take me to the place where I don't feel so small. Take me where I don't need to stand so tall. Take me to the edge so I can fall apart. There's only one way to mend a broken heart. Take me where love isn't up for sale. Take me where our hearts are not so frail. Take me where the fire still owns its spark, and there's only one way to mend a broken heart. Teach me how to see when I close my eyes. Teach me to forgive and to apologize. Show me how to love in the darkest dark, and there's only one way to mend a broken heart. Take me where the angels are close on hand. Take me where the ocean meets the sky and the land. Show me to the wisdom of an evening star. There's only one way to mend a broken heart. Take me to the place where I feel no shame. Take me where courage doesn't need a name. Learning how to cry is the hardest part, and there's only one way to mend a broken heart.
Thank you, Annie and Chris, and welcome back, Amy. Amy was here years ago and moved to Michigan a few years ago, so we're glad to have you. So creating sanctuary and welcoming one another into sanctuary, welcoming all who come in the spirit of goodwill into sanctuary, welcoming especially the historically marginalized by society, welcoming them into sanctuary. These are key aspects to establishing social justice in our community. We often think of social justice as something that happens out there, making change out there, but being sanctuary for one another and for those who are seeking sanctuary is an absolutely vital part of creating social justice in the world. We all need rest and renewal and opportunities to begin again. But sanctuary, as we have known it when we are at our best at Buff, is not just this dull, flaccid absence of all tension. Sanctuary is not a place simply to escape the injustice out there. Sanctuary exists only to the extent that we put the trust that we have in each other to good use, creating a sense of peace and ease, yes, but also grappling within ourselves and negotiating between ourselves and practicing justice among ourselves. When we gather in the Sanctuary of Beloved community, it is not to relieve ourselves of all tension. It's not just to escape and forget. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice." I think this applies both to the better world we envision outside our walls and applies to the vibrant, diverse community we work together to create within our walls. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. How can we make Buff a sanctuary, as in a place to rest, and also a place to be reinvigorated by one another's modeling of forgiveness, generosity, and trustworthiness? And how can we make Buff a sanctuary by ensuring the presence of justice among us? Our attitudes, our priorities, our sense of what is required in order to be safe are constantly changing. In the weeks leading up to the pandemic shutdown, first, when we formed a circle around the sanctuary to sing Circle Round for Freedom, at first, when it seemed to be coming our way, I remember saying, please don't assume that the person next to you wants to hold hands. Let's be conscious of one another's needs, even though there will be some awkwardness in figuring out what each other's needs are. Let's take the time to do that. And let's use this as an opportunity to practice the art of mutual consent. A week later, I said, let's keep it simpler and safer and not have anyone feel left out because they don't want to hold hands. A week later, I said, welcome to Buff on Zoom. Let's imagine ourselves holding hands. And so we continue to be respectful of one another's physical comfort zones. We're also very cognizant of one another's emotional boundaries. And this is tricky. We have to pay attention to do this respectfully, to not make assumptions, not make judgments, but take care to listen closely and be attuned to one another's body language. So those of us who need a little space sometimes don't feel like they just have to stay at home. At the same time, we can't just avoid potentially sensitive, emotionally rich conversations, which offer us so much opportunity for growth and personal insight and deepening of our trust with one another. But for each of us, the time and the place for vulnerability comes and goes. Still, when we notice ourselves crossing our arms, we might take a moment to consider what we're trying to keep in or who we're trying to keep out. And when we form little clusters of conversation, we're attuned to the presence of others who may be walled off behind us. And maybe even before they show up behind us, make sure not to form a closed circle, a closed loop, but always leave space, always an extra space among us, so people can come into the circle when they're not sure if they're welcome. So in what ways do we here at Buff embody the strengths and the weaknesses of medieval fortress churches? Because security can be a strength and, ironically, a weakness. And having permeable boundaries can be a weakness as well as a strength. The fortress churches probably served different functions at different points in their histories. Sometimes they saved villagers from invaders. Sometimes they served as farmers markets. Sometimes festival grounds. And, no doubt, places to encounter the holy. And then there's this. This is a plague pulpit, used when disease was rampant, and who knows, maybe the preacher was being a bit standoffish. The preacher in the tower, the rabble on the ground outside. Or maybe the preacher was just putting on his own mask first so that he could be available. Or maybe, in the worst case, the church, lacking both courage and humility, kept itself on the inside, while at the same time making the lowly rabble stay outside. So, in conclusion, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that an adjustment has been made to our door codes at the front such that our building is more secure than ever. The bad news is that this is the result of an accidental deletion of all of the door codes. So yours don't work anymore. So this just happened. We haven't decided yet how to proceed, how to balance the paradoxical ideal that in order to offer a safe, welcoming environment, we need boundaries. Like I said, this just happened. Just one more example of changing circumstances and opportunities to rethink what it looks like and feels like to be a place of inward sanctuary, and in very practical terms, how to adapt in order to live as beloved community. Jim is going to share something, but we have actually a few extra minutes. So first, I'm going to invite you to think for a second about a very brief anecdote, or maybe it was a long anecdote, but you're going to share it very briefly. I'll go around with the microphone. Think of an anecdote, maybe within, maybe beyond this place, that exemplifies that tension, maybe in a good way, maybe in a bad way, or a lesson from such an anecdote.
Nervously walking past somebody on the street who desperately needs help and decide, should I give them money or walk them by?
Good morning, I'm Rena. I think the lesson I've been finding in sanctuary in the last few years is the way it provides a place to be uncomfortable and to grow through that discomfort. And in order to be uncomfortable, I needed to be comfortable first and then sit into and welcome discomfort.
So I'm Barbara, and one of the things that I've learned is that when we build boundaries that are like big brick walls, when they're breached, they fall down and they hurt people. But if we think of our boundaries as tree bark, it's much more permeable and helps us breathe with our boundaries. Just a good metaphor.
Hello, folks. I'm Russell. I think for me, thinking in times of strife, there's two ways to think about security and sanctuary. And one of them is the cabin in the woods that's protected and there's no one nearby and you're isolated. But the one that I prefer is seeking community with other people. And that true security for me comes from those relationships.
This is Tom Nicholas. After my wife Trula died, I knew that I had to go within myself and grieve for Trula and look at our relationship. And at the same time, I knew that I needed to reach out to other people and find other people that I could connect with. So both of those things were needed.
Hi, I'm Piper, and I work in Bellingham Public Schools, and it's just the question of feeling safe in schools and secure, and feeling like it's a place where everyone's welcome, but not, because you have to have your ID and it's just emblematic of our times.
Thank you all for sharing. And Jim, too.
Hello. Ooh, turn it down. Hi, I'm Jim. I started attending Buff about 20 years ago when a friend of mine invited me to join the choir. Now, before that, I'd performed many flavors of music: jazz, classical, string, even the proverbial strum the guitar around the campfire. But always playing an instrument and not singing. So I'm grateful to Tim, Matt, Blake, Andy, and Kevin for putting up with me long enough for me to develop my skills on this new instrument. And I appreciate performing this for y'all, that we've done everything from Bach to Michael Jackson, and though the music genre may not really turn me on this week, I know that I'm doing it as a sense of community. And as Vlad will tell you, our sense of community extends to us being self-supporting, and we wish to draw from you all. So therefore, at this point, I would ask the ushers to come forward for the morning offering. Is that good enough?
Yes, Jim, that was good enough. And reminds me that sanctuary is a place for imperfection. All of us, in every moment, being imperfect. It is difficult to come up here, whether you're prepared or not, knowing that what you say and do is going to be imperfect and not always sensitive, not always smart, not always funny when you think it's going to be funny. But you know what? We can trust one another, trust one another's intentions, and trust one another that we're all still growing. We're going to close today with a song that was written for the merger of our Unitarian and Universalist forebears. In early 1960s, these two movements, after growing alongside each other with similar liberal mentality and approach to religious inspiration and being of use in the world, finally, even though they knew of each other, finally saw past their differences in class. That was one of the barriers that kept them apart. It's called As Tranquil Streams. And so please stand and sing with me. As tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea, our kindred hearts and minds unite to build a church that shall be free. Free from the bonds that bind the mind to narrow thought and lifeless free. Free from the social collectives to serve the cause of human need. A freedom that reveres the past, but trusts a dawning future more, and is a soul in search of truth and venture boldly and explore. Prophetic church of future waits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free. And let's say our benediction together. This is from Sanskrit poet Kalidasa. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence. The bliss of youth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a dream of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day, and let's circle round for freedom with all the caveats earlier implied.